10-minute rule bill, Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I beg that leave be given to bring in a bill to place the codes of conduct for ministers, MPs and councillors on a statutory footing and for connected purposes. Mr Deputy Speaker, many, if not most of us, on all sides of this House become members of Parliament because we want to help improve the lives of our constituents and all citizens across our great country and its nation states. As MPs, we have duties set out in our now updated codes of conduct, which also apply to ministers and the Prime Minister. In addition to upholding the law and the general law about discrimination, these duties include acting in the interest of the nation as a whole, with a special duty to our constituents, recognising the trust that has been placed on us as elected representatives, and to always behave with probity and integrity, including in our use of public resources. And within these duties, we have the general principles of conduct, often referred to as the Nolan Principles, which apply to all aspects of our parliamentary and public life. Selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. But as we know, Mr Deputy Speaker, too often over the last few years we have seen a small minority of members pay scant regard to these duties and to these principles, even willfully ignoring them. The scandals of the last few years aren't the issue of just one administration. The Parliamentary Commissioner of Standards, who is responsible for regulating the Members' Code, was initially set up in 1995 to investigate the Cash for Questions affair, and there have been other scandals since then. These have usually resulted in changes to the members and ministerial codes, as well as the business appointment rules, which regulates the so-called revolving door employment between the public and private sector of former ministers and senior officials. The impact of these abuses can't be underestimated. It may be a tiny minority who bend or break the rules, but we all become tarred by the same brush, corrupted by association. According to polling by Compassion in Politics, 4 in 5 people have no respect for politicians. 40% of parents would be concerned if their child expressed a desire to become a politician. ONS data shows that only 1 in 3 people trust the government, and 2 in 3 think politicians are only out for themselves. So just pause for a moment to consider what this tells us about the health of our democracy and the prospect of democratic engagement in Britain today and in the future. Many members will have experienced firsthand the extreme effects of the steady disintegration in our social fabric. Too many voters have become apathetic, some have become actively hostile. Hate, intolerance and violence, these are all products of the escalating distrust and increasing disdain with which the public views the political class. Part of how we restore confidence in politics and politicians is by actively demonstrating that all elected representatives will abide by the rules and principles set out in our codes of conduct. Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to acknowledge the role and work of the Parliamentary Commissioner of Standards and their office in regulating the Members' Code. I also recognise the work of honourable, right honourable and noble colleagues on the Committee of Standards and Privileges, the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee and the Committee on Standards in Public Life. I also pay tribute to the lay members of these committees. These committees represent recent reports, recommendations for changes to strengthen the various codes of conduct will, I believe, help in this regard. However, there is the need for much more significant reform in the accountability systems that regulate Parliament's conduct. The current systems are spiders' webs built up over the last 400 years or so, interacting and overlapping. Inevitably, there are still issues. My bill can't deal with everything that's needed for a whole system reform, but it can tackle the most serious and urgent issues. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, I believe the first and most egregious is the Prime Minister remaining the arbiter of the ministerial code. The terms of reference for the new so-called independent advisor to the Prime Minister on Ministers' interest, appointed on the 22nd of December last year, have not changed since the previous advisor under the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. they still fail to give independence and autonomy to initiate new investigation into breaches of the ministerial code or to publish the findings of any investigations. This has to change. My bill proposes that, as in Northern Ireland, the ministerial code, including the 7 Nolan principles, is put on the statute and that an independent commissioner on ministerial standards is established as a statutory office. His or her role would be to advise the Prime Minister on all aspects of the ministerial code, to undertake investigations both independently and referred into potential breaches of the code, to appoint a panel of parliamentarians and lay members to take part in such investigations, to publish the findings of such investigations, and to make recommendations regarding sanctions for any breaches. He or she will also have the power to make a statement on ethical matters of general public interest affecting ministers. The second issue is how members of Parliament are held to account outside of election time. The October 2022 Code of Conduct Procedures sets out what the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner can and can't do to hold MPs to account on potential breaches of the code. It defines other regulatory systems that also hold members to account, for example on expensive, which is the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, or conduct in the Chamber, which obviously is the domain of Mr. Speaker. But under paragraph 17, it expressly prohibits the Commissioner from investigating allegations solely about breaches in the 7 principles of public life. Although this has been argued that this is because principles aren't justiciable, for me this is a gap. Although this has been apologies, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My bill proposes the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner should also become a statutory office, and that under their purview, in addition to investigating members for potential breaches in Code of Conduct rules, they could also be investigated for serious and serial breaches of the 7 principles of public life. Thirdly, I want to talk about the important role our local councillors play in our communities and our democracy as a whole. Again, the vast majority of councillors work tirelessly trying to make a difference in their communities. But unfortunately, there are a minority who use their position for their own purposes and who threaten our democracy as a result of this. Currently, although there is a requirement for councillors to have a councillor code of conduct under the 2011 Localism Act, this code varies greatly between different local authorities. My bill proposes a standardised statutory councillor code of conduct which includes the Nolan principles and is accompanied by a statutory accountability system. Finally, I believe we need to review how our parliamentary system with the elected representatives within this is regulated in a way that reflects the modern, inclusive, empowering democracy that we want to become in the 21st century and beyond. Polling by Compassion in Politics found that 76% of people believe they should have the right to influence our codes of conduct. As such, my bill proposes that an independent ethics commission of constitutional legal experts is established by Parliament to advise on system reforms. The Ethics Commission will also work with Citizens' Assembly to come up with final recommendations to Parliament. As you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Compassionate Politics, I've argued for the need to reform the culture of our politics. The Prime Minister and other government ministers and members have themselves talked about the need for compassion in politics. Good policies can only come from good politics. This has to start with the conduct of those in high office, and as such, I hope the government will support my bill. Before I finish, I'd like to extend my thanks to Matt Hawkins in Compassion in Politics, George Hume in my office, and to Jolyon Morn of the Good Law Project. I commend my bill to the House.
Now, the question is that the Honourable Lady have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Contrary, no? I think the ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Kim Leadbeater, Caroline Lucas, Leila Moran, Dr. Dan Porter, and myself, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Debbie Abrahams.
Elected Representatives Code of Conduct Bill.
Second reading what day?
24th of February, sir.
24th of February. Order.